Now let's talk about domain name and server recon. We can learn a lot about a competitor by looking at their domain name records, as well as to kind of snoop into their web servers. So what can we uncover? The first thing we can figure out is the age of a domain name, and it indicates basically the maximum amount of time that a website could have been active. So however long the domain's been registered, that's as long as the website could have been active on that domain. Obviously, it doesn't show us the kind of minimum amount of time because they could have had it registered 2 years ago and only set up a website last month. So we don't really know, how long it's been used, but we can tell at least what the maximum amount of time is. Now, why this is important is if a domain name, when we look it up, has only been registered like a couple of months ago, that's not a good sign as far as looking at a business to emulate. It's just not. As I previously mentioned that we're going to go into in more detail, we get into the formulas of all this, we really want something that's older than 6 months. So if we find a domain name that's less than 6 months, that's not a very good sign. But you can do a normal whois lookup, which is available at any registrar site, or you can go to like a whois.net or whois.sc. Those websites will let you look up domain records, and that's how you can just look at the age, is the created date. So the other thing to look at when we look at domain name records is if it's a public or private registration. Now, why this can make a huge difference is there's a bunch of tools out there, and I'll mention a premium tool here in just a second, that they track the archives and the history of domain records. And when a company has many different domains registered in their names, usually under a public registration, these companies can find all those records and show you all of their domains. Now, many registrars are almost moving to default private registrations. I think GoDaddy still charges like $5 or $6 per year to hide your registration from the public, like to avoid not only people from finding your email address and spamming you, but just to keep your records private and anonymous. But many registrars are now starting to give that service away. So more and more domain records are becoming hidden, but a lot of them are still public. And when you use some of these tools, you can find all the other domains that they own. So the other thing to look at when you look at a domain name record is to look at the DNS servers. Usually you'll see like ns1.godaddy.com or ns1.bluehost.com. It'll usually indicate who their web server, host is, who their provider is. But usually if you look into a competitor's domain and you see the domain name servers are using their domain, like if we looked up cooking.com, which is a pretty big company, and we happen to find that they had a DNS server of dns1.cooking.com or ns1.cooking.com, that usually means since they're running their own DNS servers, they're probably running their own infrastructure, and they have a pretty complicated tech infrastructure. Now that's kind of a red flag if we're looking at emulating a company, especially if it's a software company or a SaaS company, whether they sell a software product or do SaaS. That means that they probably have they kind of have a very sophisticated setup going on with a lot of servers they need to manage, or just, whatever, their own data center. So that's a bad sign if you see a company that has their own DNS servers. That means they're running it all themselves and not relying on a third party. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the best trick of all when it comes to domains is what's called a reverse IP lookup. A reverse IP lookup. Now, you can go to this website, viewdns.info/reverse IP. Now, what will this do? You simply type in a domain name like cooking.com, and it'll search that server IP address and see if there are any other domain names hosted on that server. This is a great way to look at a competitor's website, or web server, I should say, and see if there's any other websites beside the primary website on that web server. Many times people will use like an Amazon hosting account or Rackspace or a large provider where they're using one dedicated IP for many different websites. Now, different emulator companies, guys that are, or girls I should say, both, that are emulating these businesses that we're going to learn about, the emulators. These people, they will often use one big server account and put a bunch of their emulated sites on the IP address. And so if you do a reverse IP lookup, Bam, you can find out all their different sites. So it's a great piece of competitive intelligence. So a very powerful tool, which is a premium tool that you have to pay for, is Domain Tools. But they have one of the longest standing archive histories of domain names on the internet. So if you want to see all the different companies that owned a certain domain, or if you want to see all of a certain companies, all their their domain portfolio of all their different domains that they own that I just talked about a minute ago, you can do that with Domain Tools. Now it's like $49 a month, but they do have a free trial, so you could go in there and try it for a few days and cancel if you didn't want to pay the money or didn't see a need to. But Domain Tools is a very, very powerful service, and you can also do reverse IP lookups and stuff like that, but you can actually use that URL that I just listed there and do it for free. So let me show you something real quick. If you go to that URL and you were to do this reverse IP lookup on the domain cooking.com, these are the results that you get. Look at all the domains that are hosted on that one server IP. We have like the BettyCrockerStore.com, Butterbell.com, Chef.com, Cook.net, DunkinDonutsShop.com. Looks like they have a bunch of email servers stored on that, running on that one IP, because you see all this email dash and then these domains. You just see all kinds of stuff. The Paula Deen store, they run, I guess, for the lady Paula Deen, who's an author for cooking cookbooks. They run the Pillsbury store. But it's incredible the kind of competitive intelligence you can find just by doing that reverse IP lookup, which is completely free to do. So anytime you're going to be looking into a competitor, you want to first do a reverse IP lookup immediately on their primary domain and see what else they've got. See what other domains they're using. Go and visit these sites. See if they're landing pages. See if they're just kind of little marketing hubs. See if they're content sites. See if they're just used for SEO. You can learn a lot by just doing that reverse IP lookup. It's a great little trick to know. So now go and do the exercise for Domain Recon and do some of these things. Pick a few competitors you can think of, look up their domains with the normal whois search, go to that URL and do the reverse IP lookup, and start to poke around and see what you can figure out. Get used to looking for that created date to find the age of domains, look and see if they run their own DNS servers, and start to learn and get used to doing this domain recon, because this is one of the initial steps when it comes to our process of doing competitive intelligence.